welcome. I'm Bill Brown with Brookings Mountain West. Thanks for coming out for our second Brookings Scholar Lecture of the semester. We're delighted to have our colleague Andre Perry out for his first official visit as a visiting scholar, but not his first time with us or in Las Vegas. Let me thank our colleagues at Greenspun College for hosting us here and the staff who's recording the lecture. You'll see the always required PowerPoint tonight. So both the lecture and the PowerPoint will be up on our website if you want to refer back to any of the data points that you'll see tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. Andre is in the Metropolitan Policy program at Brookings, where his research focuses on race and structural inequality, education, and economic inclusion. He's a proud native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and has his PhD in education policy and leadership from the University of Maryland at College Park. Like our visiting scholars, he's been meeting with faculty and students, speaking in a number of classes. Some of you, as I look around the room, have experienced that firsthand. He's also meeting with community leaders and is going to give us a national perspective on this important topic and then bring it down to the local level and give us some Las Vegas metro data. So we'll have his presentation, and as you know, the best part, well, I shouldn't say that given he's going to give the talk, but the second best part is the Q&A that follows. So get ready with your questions and comments, and I'll bring Andre up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How's everyone? I always start off with a conversation about home. If you recognize Pittsburgh at all, if you know anything about it, you will recognize the bridges. And bridges are important for me in a lot of ways. They're metaphorical. But I typically come out to music. I love music. I love hip hop. I'm a hip hop snob. If you love hip hop like I love hip hop, you probably are familiar with Mos Def. And you might be familiar with the song "Fear Not of Man," and I introduce this a line from the song "Fear Not of Man" because it really represents what I'm trying to do with this project. And as you can read, then how do people get better? Well, from my understanding, people get better when they understand that they are valuable. This understanding that you have value has important, empowering repercussions. You must know that you are valuable. This is my childhood home. As it was told to me, and there's some mythology to it, but most of it is true. When I was born, an older woman, she's Elsie Boyd, she was 63. She came to McGee's Women's Hospital, and she picked me up after I was born and took me to this house. My mother was under duress. More than likely she was abused. I don't know. But I do know that my father, by the time I was one, was a full-blown addict. He eventually moved to Detroit. He eventually was incarcerated. He eventually was murdered in prison. During that time, the woman who raised me took in other children. So I was raised during my until I graduated from high school with about 12 other kids who spent intermittent times in this house. We are brothers and sisters. She was an older black woman, but she raised white kids and black kids alike, biracial children, which was not uncommon. I wasn't in foster care. I wasn't. I was informally adopted. I like to say she just took in kids. This home is worth about $16,000, maybe less. When I go home and I see that house, I always shake my head and say, it can't be worth $16,000. It must be worth more. The woman who reared us did a great job. I would like to think did a great job. Many of us are doing wonderful things in the community. And so I start there. This understanding of value, of worth is key for me. The importance of home is key for me. And so I'll move on to my study. As we know, blackness has an impact on housing prices. We know from research, this is not new, that the percentage of black people, as it increases in place, housing prices go down. So as you can see here, in homes in which there are less than 1% black, the share of the population is 1% black, homes on average are worth about $341,000. As you go all the way down, where in communities where the share of the black population is 50% or higher, the homes are worth about $184,000. So in essence, homes are worth, black homes in majority black neighborhoods are worth 50% less than those that are mostly all white. 50% less. Now, when people see that statistic, that homes are worth 50% less, they go, well, yes, because the home quality is worse. Schools are worse. There's more crime. All of these things. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to see how much those basic structural and neighborhood characteristics actually means on price. You could control empirically for those things. So we wanted to look at how much homes are devalued by race. We wanted to be very careful. What is the impact of race on housing prices? So we looked at absolute price, which the slide you saw prior to. We looked at structural characteristics. And we looked at neighborhood amenities. So, like I said, crime, education, walkability, all those things you think about when you're about to buy a home. And here are some of the indicators or some of the variables we examined and their impact. I just wanted you to take a look here. Where this is the share of the black population. These are some of the variables. As you can see in this category, majority black spaces have great, they have great walkable spaces. They're great there. They have great transportation hubs. They're lower in education. Number of restaurants. It's interesting that majority black places and white places look similar. More gas stations in black places, which is not necessarily a good thing. But you can see, we wanted to examine all of things like this, but we wanted to control for it. So we wanted to make an apples to apples comparison. We wanted to look at homes similar in structure, in neighborhoods that have similar characteristics. And what we found after controlling for all of those variables, we found that homes are worth 23% less still. So it goes from 50% to 23%. And that amounts to about $48,000 per home, which accumulatively that amounts to $156 billion in lost assets. $156 billion. Now, where does this happen? Wherever you see these magenta circles, and they represent, and they are, the size of them represent the area of, the size of the devaluation is where home values in majority black places are less. And I encourage everyone to go to brookings.edu, make sure that you can, this is an interactive and you can click on your neck of the woods. Actually, Las Vegas in the metro it's very small, actually. In the metro area, it's insignificant. So in general, black homes in black neighborhoods in the metro are worth about the same as white homes in the metro. However, when we go to, I'll just give you a listing of cities where just to see the range. In Lynchburg, Virginia, for instance, homes in black neighborhoods are worth 81% less. 81% less. Now, again, we're comparing apples to apples. We're saying homes two-bedroom homes at this price point versus in this level of education and this level of walkability against this one in a black neighborhood. So apples to apple comparison, 81%. If you took that home in that black neighborhood and put it magically in a white neighborhood, it would be worth 81% more. That's what we're talking about. Rochester, New York, 65%. Las Vegas, 6%. But that was actually not significant. That was not significant. On the flip side, remember there were places in the green where homes in black neighborhoods are worth more. So just keep that in mind. But the overwhelming majority of the places are depreciating in value. Now let's look at Las Vegas. Now, while it was the devaluation was insignificant in the metro, it was significant in Las Vegas. Now, I'm not exactly sure where is this?
Las Vegas.
West Las Vegas.
Bonanza and MLK, Bonanza and Washington area.
Bonanza, right? There's only actually one majority black area in census tract, I should say, in Las Vegas. And in that area, you have about a 14-something% devaluation that was significant. Now, but we could see that as areas, and you can see by the shading, the darker the areas, the less black folk, but there's still devaluation in general at that rate. And so what we did was we took that rate of 14% and we essentially said, let's look at the proportion of black folk in those census tracts to see accumulatively how much that is losing, how much Las Vegas is losing in revenue. And that came out to about $78.5 million in lost revenues because of devaluation. Now, again, this is not the previous map. We looked at places where they were 50% higher. That's not true. So we had to look at places on the gradient of blackness, so to speak, places 30%, 20%. So that's where you get this number. But I want to go back to this, right? And I want to go back to my father. The narrative is he made poor choices, that he hurt people, he hurt himself, he belonged in jail, he needed to pull himself up by his bootstraps, so on and so forth. Personal responsibility, that's the narrative. I want to give you a sense what 156 billion is. If on average we took what black business owners start with, 156 billion would have started 4.4 million businesses. It would have paid for 8.1 million four-year degrees. It would have replaced the pipes in Flint 3,000 times. It would have essentially paid for all of Hurricane Katrina. That's what $156 billion does. In essence, it's the money that people should be using to uplift themselves. It is the money that municipalities should be using to fund their schools. It's the money that they should be using to fix their roads. Racism is robbing people of the ability to lift themselves up. We're talking about people who are purchasing homes, doing everything asked of them, society asks of them to do, and we're taking money away from them. Now, we also, Raj Chetty and his team at Stanford, Census Bureau, and others, they look at social mobility. So we looked at the places where there were high devaluation. Not surprisingly, the places with the lowest valuation also had low social mobility. So we knew that was probably the case because of the reasons I just stated, that these places where more money should be in communities, you're seeing people not able to rise up the social ladder. That their incomes have been throttled by their inability to leverage equity. Again, equity gives you education, it gives you the ability to move to a better neighborhood, right? It gives you all of those things. If you don't have that, you don't have the real means to lift yourselves up. Now, one of my my favorite sayings, and this is me, this is a quotable for me, and you should always hit me up on Twitter at Andre Perry EDU, right? There's nothing wrong with racism, there's nothing wrong with black people that ending racism can't solve. This notion that individual behaviors trumps all is ridiculous. They say, oh, look at you. What was the difference between you and your father? Not much. Not much. I like to say my grandmother was the woman that raised me, call her grandma, call her mom. I like to say she was an exceptional being. She had the same level of education as my father. They both had an 8th grade education. One did wonders with it, another didn't. When I look at my block, there's been plenty of kids who didn't make it. Actually, of my brothers and sisters, 2, one is incarcerated for life, and one they have not found in quite some time. I'm assuming he is gone. So, yes, there have been people who have that I've found connections to, and they gave me opportunity, and those opportunities panned out. But I am not the smartest, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the boldest. In some ways I got lucky. But I always say, if you really do want more success stories, you end racism. That's the way to go. That's the fastest way. You give people opportunity. Now, why is this important? I'll circle all the way back to the top. Know your price. I'm writing a book right now. In a short period of time, a few weeks, I think, you can pre-order the book, Know Your Price, on Amazon. And you can follow me on Twitter to get the latest updates. That's good. But Know Your Price. Where do I get the title Know Your Price? My favorite play in all the world is 2 Trains Running by August Wilson. You should know the playwright, one of the greatest playwrights of all time. He's from Pittsburgh. In the play Two Trains Running, the main character, Memphis, his name is Memphis, is about to have his house seized through eminent domain. And they're going to give him $15,000 for it. Once he hears the price, he says, I'm not selling my property for $15,000. I have my clause, I have my price, I got my price. He goes back and forth with the city throughout the entire play. There's another character, Hambone. Hambone paints a fence for a ham, right? He never gets his ham. Throughout the play, he goes back and forth. Give me my ham, give me my ham. He never gets his ham until he goes crazy and dies demanding his ham. Now, there's actually a happy ending to the story. That the main character, Memphis, gets much more than what he asked for. I think it's $30,000. The price kept going up, and he kept demanding. The moral of the story should be clear. Know that you have value. Know that you have worth. You know, what my project is attempting to do is give people a price to demand their worth. You know, a lot of projects that think tanks and research organizations, what we do, we give data to the muckety-mucks of society. We work, and particularly in Brookings, I'm at Brookings, so we work with people in the federal government, we work with heads of state, we work with mayors. You know, I'm going to do that, but mostly I'm trying to get this information to the people whose homes are devalued. I really want them to know their price. And it goes back to like this important, you know, things get better when people understand that they are valuable. Every single day we tell people by their price on their homes that they were worth less than someone else. It's a lie. It is a lie. You know, my goal is to really to empower people so they can animate their communities. Yes, low education matters. No question. It lowers the price. Crime matters. It lowers the price. You know, gas stations lower the price. You know, so there are things in our communities that we need to change, and it will raise the values of our homes. No question about it. But the actual, what these homes are priced is almost as if people are looking at black communities and saying there's 3 times more crime than it actually is. Education is worse than it actually is. And then what happens? A powerful cycle occurs that people devalue, then they divest, they leave. Social issues happen. People use drugs. People resort to crime. Now, this project is about giving people information so they can not only demand their price, but also invest in themselves. You know, that sometimes it's worth to try to put a coffee shop in the hood, to paint the facade, to animate all the different assets that you have in a community. No, and I really do mean this. Know that there are assets in our communities, that our communities are not barren. What you didn't see is in this data that there is more than $600 billion of housing assets in majority black places. $600 billion. Remember when Trump was on the campaign trail and he pleaded to the black community, he asked, what do you have to lose? Right? What do you have to lose? Vote for me. just in housing, there's $600 billion to lose. There is strength in the hood, but it's devalued. So my job is to make sure that we point to those assets, that homes, in this particular project, homes are great assets in black communities. They're just devalued. But guess what else is, what else are devalued? Leadership. Teachers. Infrastructure. I mean, we racialize public transportation all day long. It's actually good to have great public transportation. These are good things. So I'm going to conclude there. We're going to take some questions. But know that you have value. Know that when you look at black communities, that there's value there, that we should be identifying assets, because no one's going to invest in deficits. No one's going to say, hey, I'm going to pour a ton of money in a bunch of deficits and problems. We just don't do that. But we will put money into strength. And many of our communities deserve it. So thank you for that presentation. We're right at my moment where I'm going to start taking questions. So who's going to be the first brave one to take a question? You can give me a round of applause at this point. Go for it.
Andre, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting information and use of statistics. I work for a community development financial institution. So all day long, I see opportunities for investment, right, in what's called low-income communities or disenfranchised communities and things of that nature. That's the role that I play within the CDFI. I'm production manager, so I go out and look for opportunities. There are federal programs that have been started, low-income housing tax credits, new market tax credits that reward private developers to go into communities that we've kind of talked about to develop projects, right? Through these use of new market tax credits, low-income housing tax credits. But essentially what I've seen happen is that communities actually do change with these investments, but the people who actually live there, the people whose homes are devalued, eventually find it that they are no longer able to live in those communities, not because the values just shoot right up. It's just that everything else becomes more expensive, and for whatever reason, they can't pay the taxes any longer because their incomes don't go up at the same rate. Or other things start to happen, people offer them money to move out and sell their property, and so now the whole community actually ends up changing. And then people just can't afford to live there any longer.
And it can happen rapidly.
And it can happen extremely rapidly. So my longer question is, have you studied that in your work? And what are some of the best practices that maybe you've seen that can control for displacement and gentrification and things of that nature, while also improving the value for everybody?
As a general rule of thumb, you always invest in people and not places. When you invest in places and not people, you get gentrification. The goal should always be to find ways to employ people, to give people enough entrepreneurial opportunities, to have them actually own businesses and homes. We know how to invest in physical things, buildings, and give tax breaks for folks who invest in things. What we don't know how to do well is invest in people. And so there are some developers who take the long range. Most are in for the quick turnaround. So they'll invest in things that they want a fast return. What we need in many communities are people who would like to invest in communities over a 20, 30 year period. And that takes generally people with enough capital to wait and develop communities. But there's too many developers out there who want the quick hit. But there are people who invest over time. And those are the kind of folks we need in our communities. Because as you know, in many cities, because of the tech boom and other things, folks are priced out just like that. And so we need places, people to have a long-range strategy in developing people.
What are your feelings about revolving funds, and how have you seen them work? Because there is a push right now in West Las Vegas to sort of get involved in this, and I think it has some hope, but I'm afraid that it's going to be outpaced by developers who want to come in and do a quick turnaround, which I'm also hearing the same things. People are now showing interest in doing that, and so how does a revolving fund push back?
I'm gonna not answer because I don't know enough about it. That's one of those things I'm just not up to speed on. But it sounds like you have some ideas. I mean, if you could just briefly share some of those.
Okay.
Because I'm always saying, I know people got great ideas.
Well, I'm not in leadership, but we have an organization here in Nevada.
Don't devalue yourself one, but go ahead.
I'm not going to devalue myself.
Okay.
I'm telling the truth. So the Nevada Preservation Foundation has been around for 7 or 8 years, and they've decided they want to come into the West Las Vegas area and do a revolving fund. They've gotten grant money to do some studies, and they're asking for input from the community. And so I've run for office, I've been active, and so I got pegged. So I'm very interested in it because I think housing is important. I love what you said about the devaluing of public works. If you took a few minutes to drive through the West Side, you would see how poorly the streets are kept and how poorly maintained sidewalks are, the basic things that people need to get where they want to go, right? What makes a community walkable, what makes it attractive, what makes people want to live there. Do we have bicycle lanes? Are they protected? Are there trees? Are they buffered? So those kinds of public works things I felt for years have been wanting. It's great to I'm gonna
offer this though.
Okay.
I know that just a few weeks ago or last week, I can't remember, I invited a guy by the name of Bill Bates. He's the president of the American Institute of Architects, the AIA. I might have that incorrect. And he works with the Preservation Society in Pittsburgh. He's the national president, but he's from Pittsburgh. And he believes that the reason why you work with existing property, because one, it develops slowly. So if you develop things in mass, you're more than likely to displace people and give a lot of people an opportunity to come in to displace and raise rent. So he believes in the pacing of rebuild, and also in understanding that there's a connection between architecture and former buildings and community, that folks are connected to prior buildings. And so I do think, though, that it's clear there's a demand for low-income housing. I mean, so it's probably a combination of developments that we need in places. The problem with mixed income developments is that you lose the wealth building capacity of those properties. So when you want to develop low income housing, you're essentially going to take away the ability for it to make money. Now, I'm okay with that, because the other conversation that needs to be had, there needs to be a diversification of wealth building opportunities particularly in black communities. What you saw in Detroit and in other places was that during the recession, it wiped out black wealth, essentially. You saw it here also, but black folk disproportionately have their wealth tied up into real estate. And so there needs to be a conversation also about how do we diversify wealth building in communities. Because the American dream is rooted in owning a home. We all want to own a home, but it's probably not going to be as big a wealth builder as it was in the past. So we need to think about other ways. Baby bonds, for instance. I mean, there are creative ways that people are thinking. Derek Hamilton is somebody that comes to mind, an economist at Ohio State, the Kirwan Institute, and others. And so I'll leave it at that for now. Other questions? Go for it.
So I kind of have a cluster of questions. You can pick them apart
Yep.
or take them where you want. With your data, is it looking at a single point in time, or?
Yeah. So this is we use the most recent Zillow data and census data. So it's not over a period of time. That's here and now.
So it's kind of a.
Yep.
And then for the areas that are appreciating, is that tied to gentrification, or is that tied to any demographic change in that area?
You know, I'm asked that question a lot. What can you learn from the green circles? You know, some of it is, that's the way the model, we create these psychometric models, and that's what comes out, and some of it is hard to explain. In some states, it's complicated, like Florida, and maybe even this area. But Florida, for sure, you have retirement homes and black communities sort of living side by side, so it might muddle up the data. The number one thing I can guess is that in many places, wealthy black folk live in the same place near low-income working-class whites. So Boston, for instance, is one of those cities where it's appreciating. The bougie black folk live in one area of town, and there's a lot of low-income whites living by. So you'll see those home prices valued higher. But I would caution anyone from thinking that those places where the green dots are less racist. You don't want to think that. But sometimes there's statistical noise that, and this is where I really think journalists and qualitative researchers need to examine this, because there's a story behind every dot. And you need to just go in and see what's happening. The West, and Las Vegas included, there's less segregation, which is a good thing. So that in that metro number that was there was a negative number, but it was insignificant. So homes are very similar, and that's generally because you're not as segregated as in the East, in the Midwest, where there's stark lines. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing, but still there's some devaluation, particularly in Vegas, the city of Vegas.
And then finally, in the most devalued areas, what percentage of the homes are owner occupied? And kind of what's the rent versus own divide kind of across your data set?
It varies. I would say Oh man, I have to look. The worst. Oh, the worst. You know, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to check, but you know, there's a lot of places where the landlords are elsewhere. You know, it's like I want to say like Chicago is one of the worst places for that, but there are others where there is higher than you think, and so I need to have that data available. I want to say that we mention it in the actual report. So if you just pull down the report, and then we can also draw down some of those numbers. Some of it is easy to get.
The implication of your study is not just that sort of explicit racism or implicit bias exists. It's that you're like almost putting a dollar value on the strength of that, almost. Yeah. Like the implication is that racism and implicit bias is so strong that people aren't taking advantage of the like proverbial $156 billion on the sidewalk. And that to me is very discouraging, and you seem like a very optimistic guy. And so what sort of projects or progress or...
Okay, but okay, this is what I really want people to absorb this, because people get depressed when they see my numbers. You know, there's a lot of people who've said this for years, my home is worth more than this, and did not have the evidence. When you have evidence, you can do things with it. Like from this perspective, we're talking with policymakers who are saying, hey, let's put tax credits down where there's devaluation, because now there's actually a dollar sign attached to it. You know, I don't, and I really do believe this is what's empowering. The homes are worth more than they are priced. You can actually take risk that you wouldn't take before. And also, communities can build around their assets. You know, I can't say this enough. One of the, this is a limited, you know, we do need to start identifying what's right in communities. We seldom do that. We're so busy looking at what's broken, what's wrong, and not seizing the opportunity. Because in actuality, there's a lot of developers who see what's right in black communities. There's a lot of white folk that see what's right in black communities, and they're getting a discount. You know, that's a 23% discount, right? You know, in some places, you cannot get a 3-bedroom, you know, 2-bath place for a reasonable price. It's impossible. And be a teacher or something, except for in black communities. But but black folk too. This is the other thing. A report came out right around the time mine did, and black folk are moving out of the hood, but these are places you got to jump on. And this is the other thing, if you're black, they're culturally safe. You know, you can walk down the street, people greet each other, there's not this tension about, should I talk to the person? What's going on? There's some, there's some cultural safety. You know, there's benefits to living in the hood. So we just gotta figure that. So be hopeful. Always be hopeful for information.
So
here and there and there.
Now that you have this research, is this just the basis of research, or are you moving? Like, what are you doing?
Good.
This?
Yeah, because I'm not a housing advocate. I'm not a housing expert.
Right. Right, because
Yeah.
like second part of the research is qualitative anecdotal evidence,
Yeah.
you know, uplifting the stories of like the people who are successful when it comes to.
But that's why you should get the book, Know Your Price, for one. Know your
It's on the
price.
list.
Know your price. But this is also about understanding that businesses in black communities are devalued. We can look at leadership, schools, other infrastructure. That this is a framework for looking for assets. Again, I'm looking for strengths. They may be devalued in some cases, but I'm also looking for strength. Like one of the projects, I'm looking at what to do with abandoned schools. In some places in the United States, the school-age population is dropping. They're closing schools. What to do with them? I'm examining one entrepreneur who's creating a business incubator in an abandoned school. I love the idea because many of these places, they may have fewer students or fewer children, but they have educational needs and they need places to ideate and develop and grow businesses. So why not invest in that public social infrastructure for those purposes? So, you know, I generally look at things, I am an optimist. I look at things and say, oh, there's an opportunity there. You know, and that's what I try to do. That's the basis of my work. Did I say there and then and there?
Oh, yeah.
Or, oh. Okay, we'll go, sorry.
Hi, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. I guess my question is to piggyback off the optimism, which I do appreciate. It makes me feel motivated to do something. And as someone who's been in the housing market and, you know, in the housing industry for a while, I see both sides because we've gone through the scary side of, you know, overinflation in our communities.
Yeah.
And then on the west side was safe enough to avoid that and the trouble that came with it for the most part. But at the same time, with the control factors being the same, with this 23%, it feels very much like it's a tangible issue that we can sort of, you know, control. So can we be an effective change agent by pressuring or making stricter guidelines on appraisers that if it is the same home in the same area, you know, in very same control factors, we're holding you accountable for being able to present that value for both someplace on the southwest side as well as on the west side. How can we?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm glad you raised that because there's unconscious bias. Yes, no question. And that's harder to address. But that we absolutely know that appraisers, lenders, and real estate agent practices are rife with bias. You know, Obama did many things with the Fair Housing Act, but he did not do race-placed policies. Those are still needed. You know, and so there's actual policy recommendations on the table, and I encourage everyone to go to Brookings. We had a public announcement or release of the paper, and I had housing advocates really outline the different policies that can really be deployed to address these issues. I encourage people to go on this site and look at that. But there are tangible things we can do to reduce that devaluation. But some of it, and you know, and this is where I do get very plain, some of this is stopping racism in its tracks. We know when we utter things that devalue communities. You know, I don't know how many times when I present these data, somebody always stands up and says, but if we could only get these kids to pull up their pants, or, you know, and it's like, man, Like, get off of that. Like, you know, as if the kids going to Harvard got in because of their belt wearing strategies. You know, their haircuts. Come on. That's not that's it. I mean, it matters some, but not really. Wealth is more important. And I'm a big community value person. I believe in having community standards. I believe in it. But I mean, come on. Your hoodie? I mean, when I was coming up, I was wearing my pants backwards. You know, I was dancing on my head. Things didn't make sense. You know, that's not the issue. There are structural reasons why communities don't progress. You can point to policy. The policy, the housing policies after World War II and others enabled white families to develop wealth. And it did not allow black people to develop wealth. Racial housing covenants essentially trapped black families in communities that they couldn't have resources to develop their properties. That's not personal responsibility. If it is a personal responsibility, then it is about policymakers that made racist decisions. Now we got to get off. This is about structures. Let's break down these structures that prevent growth.
This is my daughter.
Oh, yes.
How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good.
Future urban planner.
That's right.
That's
I've
good.
got one in her senior year at FAU.
Oh, very good.
So I'm a 4th grade teacher here in the Valley. And I have 3 daughters, 26, 21, and 12. All of them know that Caucasian acquisition of black-owned land came from racial violence, adverse possession after racial violence, eminent domain, tax inflation, since 1863. It's 2019. Still doing the same stuff. So my question is, I'm part of a movement. People are calling us Russian bots. So we are the American descendants of enslaved people, of chattel slavery. We have legitimate claims for reparations in the United States. So John, he's been trying to get this bill passed, H.R. 40, for 20 years now, just to do a study on whether reparations are a legitimate claim, just for the study. We have all the data. You're here standing tonight as living proof that we have the data. So for me, it's simple. And that is, we groom African Americans, specifically ADOS children, for urban planning leadership. We don't ask, we just do it. We don't ask white people, we don't ask bougie black people. We just do what we need to do for our kids. That's what we do. Now, you have a study. What is this study going to do for bringing the tangibles that we are looking from these black people who are running for president, who dance around these issues that you're talking about, who have no problem locking people up, no problem locking truant mothers, children of, and I'm a teacher. I understand that some kids don't come to school because they're habitually sick, whatever. What is it that your study can do to bring the tangibles, to bring out those tangibles that we're looking for in the leadership that's thrown at us for?
Well, one study, and I'm a trained academic. I've been a practitioner, and I've said this all the time. If you're ever waiting for universities and think tanks to bring social justice, you're going to be waiting a long time. Right. And I mean that. Ultimately, what I do is provide people like you information that regular folks, the woman who was with an 8th grade education that raised me, those are the people who do. You know, what this project is attempting to do is to give people ammunition that they can use to mobilize their communities. You know, and I can say this about Brookings. Brookings is a tremendous organization. We're now starting to do this kind of work. We are diversifying our scholars because I'm glad you said we need urban planners. I was in an article recently that talked about the lack of economists in the field, and I'm not an economist. Obviously I do work that enters that field, but we need people who are doers. You know, there's no question. We need urban planners, we need teachers, we need architects. And folks need to take that information and run with it. So I never want to come off as a savior, because I really do believe that academics, think tank people, we have a role. There's no question, we have a powerful role to give people information, but never discount where change is going to come from. It's going to come from people like you. So I see I got 30 seconds to close out. So that was a great way to close. I want to thank you at UNLV for having me and Brookings Mountain West. It's been wonderful. You can clap again. Man, come on. Yes.
In case you forgot, Andre has a book coming out.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, sir. Thank all of you for joining us. We'll be around for a couple minutes if you have an unasked question or comment. We have a little break before we're back with our next lecture, but on April 3rd, we'll be back in this room with another colleague from Brookings, and we'll be looking at the opioid crisis, both globally, nationally, and it's, as you all may well know, it's a serious issue here in Nevada as well. So I hope you can join us for that if you have time. So you'll be able to have people who weren't here tonight enjoy Andre's talk once we get it up on our website, on our YouTube channel. And please come back and see us for our next events.